My name is Julia, and today we're going to be painting our Starry Night mushroom. I, like everybody else, am super obsessed with mushrooms right now. I like mushroom rugs, mushroom pictures all over the house, everything mushrooms. And we're going to be painting in acrylic paints. Even if you've never painted before, this is a great painting for absolute beginners. You don't need any experience. Let's go over our materials. So here we have a 12 by 12 square canvas, but any square canvas would really work. I'm going to be painting with Liquitex Basics, and the colors we're going to be using today are titanium white, primary yellow, cadmium red medium, phthalo blue, phthalo green, Mars black, and light blue permanent. Really any like lighter blue will work for this. This is kind of what I have, and I'm running out of this one, so I might need to use another blue, but any lighter blue. If you mix white with blue, yes, it makes a lighter blue, but I'm looking for something a little bit more vibrant. And then I've got a jar of water, some paper towel, and these are some brushes that could be helpful for this painting, but honestly, this is such an easy painting. You don't need to have these exact brushes, but I've got a size 0 brush, just a very small little detail brush. We have a Filbert. This is a size 2 Filbert. We have a pointed round. This is a size 6. And then another pointed round, and this, I can no longer read the size on. I think it's a mystery. That's what it is. Might be a size. See, it says 2, but that doesn't make sense because that's pretty small. And it's not quite a 12, but just basically a medium pointed round brush will work. This painting is very painterly, meaning that we see the brush strokes. When you're painting more realistically, you're trying to kind of blend everything in so that you don't see any of the brush strokes up close. But with this painting, we're really shooting for seeing a lot of brush strokes. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Acrylic paint does dry very quickly, so just be careful of your clothes. Wear an apron if you'd like. I'm going to start off with my Filbert brush here. I'm going to dip that in the water. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some of my phthalo blue. So after you dab your brush in the water, you can dab it on your paper towel if you get too much water on there. And we're going to first do a little bit of an outline here. So we're going to divide up our canvas. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to eyeball halfway between the top and the bottom. And if I'm using this brush, if I use the flat part of it, I can make a very thick line. If I use the edge, I can make a very thin line. So I'm going to be using the edge of my brush right now to do a line across horizontally. And then I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to eyeball the center going vertically. And I'm going to do a line going up. So it doesn't need to be exact. I'm not using a ruler. We're just trying to make sure that we have a large enough mushroom. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is our horizon line, and this horizon line is going to bend a little bit, and it's going to start about 1 to 2 inches below your halfway point. And I'm going to use the edge of my brush, and I'm just going to kind of dip down here. And come up the other side. Again, it's land, it doesn't need to be perfect. I'm grabbing a little bit more paint here. And I'm now going to start sketching in my mushroom. So the first thing we're gonna do is a little line where we want our mushroom to stop. So our mushroom is gonna begin right here at our halfway point. And we're gonna eyeball halfway on this side. You can make a little mark. Eyeball halfway on this side. Make a little mark. And now we're gonna start sketching it in. So the first thing we wanna do is we wanna get a big oval for the inside of the mushroom. If you wanna switch to your pointed brush, I wouldn't switch to your detail brush because it's not gonna hold enough paint. But if you want to switch to your pointed brush right now, you can. This brush, the Filbert or anything flat, is going to be easier to make thin lines that are straight. But once you start making curvier lines, you might want a pointed brush instead. I'm going to go ahead and stick with my Filbert for now. And I'm going to eyeball halfway here, and then I'm going to go down just a little bit from that. And here I'm going to put a big oval. It's a very skinny oval, so I'm using the edge of my brush here. And you can kind of swing around a few times to get it in how you'd like it. And now I'm going to go around the outside of that. And I'm going to add in my mushroom. So it's going curving around, and then it kind of comes up to a rounded point and then comes back down and around. Now I need my stem. So my stem is going to start halfway. So here's our oval shape. Halfway in our oval shape is where the stem's going to start. So I'm going to do a horizontal line right here that's about 1 inch on each side. And then I'm going to take the edge of my brush here. I'm going to do a line that's kind of curving slightly to the right and then fanning out. And then come over here slightly to the left and then fanning out. And you might be wondering, why are we doing this in such a dark color if we don't want to see it later and we want to paint over it? It's because the blue underneath the red is going to give kind of a nice little shadow. And I'm going to show you how to erase some of the kind of inner lines that you have there. So once you get your shape how you want it, and we're going to add on some other mushrooms later. You can drop your brush in your water. If you wipe your brush on your paper towel, it's going to keep your water cleaner longer. And now I'm going to show you how acrylic paint can be used kind of like an eraser. So I'm going to take a piece of paper towel here, and I'm going to dip it into my water. And I'm going to take that, and I'm just going to scrub off the lines that I used to divide up the canvas. And you're still going to see them a little bit, but they're going to be not as dark. And this is all going to be blue over there, so it doesn't really matter that much. Okay. And this also helps you from not having any kind of thick paint that's not dry and we don't realize it. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're actually gonna fill in this center part with black. So you could either use pure black, or you can also mix together red and blue. So I'll show you what that looks like first. So I'm dabbing my brush, make sure there's not too much paint on it. So I'm gonna take some red and some blue and mix that together. And red and green also works too. So if it looks a little too maroon, that means you have more red in there, and you can add more blue. And it's just gonna make a very deep purple. So sometimes when people are painting, they don't like to use pure black, or they want to use pure black sparingly so that it doesn't stand out too much, and they save the pure black for little details to make it really stand out with contrast. So notice I'm not painting my stem, and I'm using the flat part of my brush to fill this in. And like I said before, you can also just use pure black if you want to. So these canvases, for some reason, this batch, it's like you can really see the texture of the canvas. Some people love that. It's kind of like a crayon-like texture. I'm not a huge fan of it for some reason, so I'm going to use a lot of paint and extra water. When I'm seeing that texture show through, I'm going to use more paint and more water to really get it filled in. Okay, so once you get your oval filled in here, that's going to be the underside of the mushroom. I'm going to take this and even outline it a little bit more to get kind of just some darker that's going to be underneath that red. And again, I'm seeing that texture show through, so I'm just adding a little bit of water. Now I'm using the edge of my brush here. And when I start to run out of paint, when there's barely any paint on my brush, I'm going to go ahead and take my brush, and you can wipe it on the side to make sure that there's not too much. I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to use the flat side, and I'm very lightly going to flick my brush downwards to darken the top of the stem here. And we'll probably end up darkening it again, but that's good for now. All right, so now I'm going to really make sure that I wipe my brush off on the side, because I do want to keep my water clean until I'm finished doing the pale yellow. Because if your water's really dirty, it's going to make your pale yellow not so pale. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to a pointed round brush. I'm going to use my smaller one. And I'm going to mix together some white and some yellow. I think I'll add just a teeny bit of water, not too much. And this is a tint, so anytime you're using a lot of white and a little bit of color, then that is called a tint. So how this brush works is if you press down really hard, you're going to make a very thick line. If you very lightly glide along the canvas, you can make a very thin line. So the more pressure you apply, the thicker your line is going to be. And I'm going to do a little moon right up above this mushroom. So here's my center line. I'm going to go over about 1.5 inches on each side here. And I'm just basically drawing a half circle. And you just got to kind of imagine the bottom of it, because the mushroom is going over the top of it. And now I'm just filling it in, making sure I get a lot of paint on there. And you can use a lot of white if you still have a line back there from your underpainting. And this is a very whimsical painting. It's not realistic, so it doesn't need to be perfect. Now I'm going to take some straight yellow. Add a little bit of that on the left there. And now I'm going to take some straight white and I'm going to add some streaks of straight white. So I'm doing horizontal brush strokes just to make it a little more painterly. I just really want to see the brush strokes in there. The next thing I'm going to do is add in my little stars. So this is your painting. You can do however many stars that you'd like to. There's really no rule for how many you can do. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to maybe do one big one over in this corner, about 1 inch wide. So I'm just spinning my brush in a circle with the white and yellow mixed together. And then maybe I'm going to do one that's a little bit smaller over here. And then I'm gonna do a really itsy bitsy one over here. And then a little teeny one down here. And you actually wanna make your circles, you wanna do thicker paint for these, and you wanna make them just a little bit bigger than you plan on them being, because we have to add a glow around the edge. I'm gonna come over here. Maybe I'll do a big one over here. And then a little teeny one maybe. Medium size one over here. And let's see, I usually like odd numbers, so that's too even, so I'm gonna have to add one more in. Add one right here. So now I'm gonna take my brush and maybe make a couple of them a little extra dark. So I'll use some straight yellow in this one. And just right over the top, I'm kind of doing a swirl motion here. And maybe one of them you want to do white to make it really bright. And I'm also going to show you after that dries a little bit how you can put a white dot in the middle of each of them. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is start filling in the area around the stars. So I feel like I have this nice yellow paint on my brush though, so I'm just going to drop this off down here to clean my brush off a little bit. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush out, pressing it against the bottom of the glass, spinning it in a circle. Dab it on my paper towel a little bit. And we're going to start to fill in our sky. So this is where this light blue comes in handy. And you can use straight light blue as it is. Or if you want to add some white to it, you can do that as well. I'm starting off with just straight light blue. Start filling it in. And I'm going to go around my stars here. And around my moon. And when a canvas is like this, it just means that they didn't use very much like primer on it. And what you could do is you could get some, if that happened to you, I'm going to get some water here. You could get some primer and just prime it before you paint. That's not too hard. But since I haven't done that, I'm just using some extra water here. Just to make sure I get it filled in. And I'll focus on just this side here first. Oh, I picked up a little bit of yellow, and so I'm just going to brush over that again. And another little trick you can do is you can use your fingers. So if I put my finger halfway on the yellow, halfway on the blue, I can get a nice little kind of glow and fade there. You could also do that with a brush. If you didn't want to get your fingers dirty, you could take the flat part of the filbert, put it half on the yellow, half on the blue, and just kind of brush over it. And it'll make it look like it's glowing. And you can also do that around your stars. So I've got some pretty thick paint on here because I don't want it to dry too fast. And while I have this lighter blue, I'm gonna go ahead and draw another little horizon line. So here's your halfway mark over here. I'm gonna come up above that, maybe about an inch. So here's the edge of my mushroom. So it's kind of right in line with that, an inch over here, and I'm just gonna kind of dip down and then back up. So this whole area in here and in here is gonna be kind of a lighter teal area, and then up here is gonna be darker. Okay, so once I've got the area around my stars filled in there, now I'm going to start adding in some darker blue. And let me just take your light blue and just do a little bit of thick paint right here, kind of as a barrier. Now you can either clean your brush out or just wipe it on the side and grab some of the darker blue and start coming in to fill the rest of the canvas in over here. So first I'm going to the areas without the light blue and trying not to touch the light blue. And I'm trying to get some really thick paint in the corner here because that's going to make it look even darker. If you wanted a more muted painting, you could add in a little bit of red and yellow to your blue to make it more muted. I'm going for more of a bright look. So now I'm going to come down here, and this is where it gets more painterly. I'm going to do short brush strokes. So long brush strokes back and forth is going to blend and make it look really smooth. I'm now, as I'm filling this in, I'm going to start to do short brush strokes. So I'm coming up the side of my mushroom here. And now I'm going to grab my lighter blue. And I have some dark blue on my brush, but I'm going to start to do some short brush strokes around my moon or my stars. And notice how I'm doing circular motion strokes. I'm not going straight back and forth, side to side, or up and down. So right here, I'm going to need a little bit more of the darker blue. And I got some really thick paint there, I can see, so I'm just going to wipe that because I'm going to want to blend my stars in a little bit more than that. And now I'm also going to go around my moon here, adding in some shorter brush strokes. So I'm bringing dark blue closer to my stars, and I'm bringing light blue out away from my stars. Okay. Now I'm going to go start on this side here. So I'm going to wipe my brush off, clean my brush out in my water. Dab it on my paper towel. I'm going to get my lighter blue again. Lots of paint, not being shy with it. Going around my stars. An extra blue down here at the edge so we can get that to kind of blend in. And I'm going to check and make sure that you don't have a crazy glare right now. which it doesn't look too bad. I put some bright lights on so that you can really see, but sometimes that makes a really bad glare when we're doing lots of paint and lighter colors. So I'm just adding a little bit more of the light blue. Make sure I get some nice thick paint in there to work with. And then I'm going to come in with my dark blue. So make sure you get this area. Wipe your brush off a little bit. Grab your darker blue and start filling in the areas without the light blue first. And then you start doing the short brush strokes on top of the light blue. If it starts to just kind of turn only light blue, you can go back and grab some more of the dark blue. I'm also going to go right along the top here. I'm going to blend those together a little bit. So notice right here I have a really dark blue streak on top of the light blue. I tend to like streaky paintings with like high contrast. If I keep brushing over this again and again and again, what's going to happen, right? It's just going to become one color of blue the more that you blend it. So if you want to maintain that kind of streakiness, you don't want to brush over it too many times. And if it's just kind of blending in too much, go back and grab more paint. More of the plain dark blue. But it's really up to you. If you want it more blended or brighter. And I'm going to make sure I don't have any too thick of paint over here that's going to turn my red purple when I go to fill in my mushroom there. Okay. So if you're painting your edges, you can drop off any of your thick paint that's on your brush right there on the side. All right, the next thing I'm gonna do, clean my brush out here. And I'm making sure, sometimes paint gets caught down at the bottom. I'm making sure I get that paint all off of there. And I'm gonna go back to our pale yellow mixture. I'm gonna load up my small pointed round brush, and you might need to rest your arm on your canvas for this part because it's still gonna be a little bit wet. And if you want to, you can kind of go in around your stars and add a little bit more pale yellow. And it's going to turn the area around your star a little bit green. And if you pick up too much blue, that's okay. Just kind of Wipe it off on the side. It's going to give it a nice little glow. And this part is definitely optional. If you like your stars the way they are, you can leave them as is. And if any of your stars are too big, you can also use this part to make them like a little bit smaller. And variation creates interest, right? So if all of our stars were the exact same size, shade, then they might not look very interesting. So I'm going to make sure that this one stays larger. And if you really wanted a glow, you could even take your yellow out even further. You could come in and, you know, do a little couple lines outside of the star. So I'll show you, especially around the moon here. I could give a little starry night glow there. So that's an option as well. So now I'm going to come over and do the same thing over on these guys. If I pick up any thick blue paint, I can pick it up with my finger, with my brush, and just wipe it off on the side. Made that one a little bit smaller. Okay. So now I'm going to show you a fun little thing you can do. I'm going to clean my brush out. Make sure it's very clean, very dry. Same brush. I'm just going to take some white, a glob of white, and I'm going to dab it in the middle of some of my stars. And up close, it's just going to look like a glob of paint. But from far away, it's going to really stand out. And I'm going to do kind of these smaller ones. And then I think with these two bigger ones, I'm going to try to do a little swirl of the yellow and the white at the same time. Just kind of get some thicker paint in there. And you could also use your detail brush for this part. I see one little thing here that I want to smooth out right here. And I need a little bit more paint here to cover up that blue in the background. Okay. So now we're going to start filling in this area down here. You can really use any of the brushes right here. You could use your larger pointed brush. your smaller pointed brush, or you could use your Filbert. I think I'll use my Filbert. I'm gonna clean my brush out here. And the first thing I'm gonna do is the same yellow and white tint, the pale yellow. And I'm trying to get a lot of paint here. And I'm going to add in short brush strokes that are going in the same direction as this line, so kind of down towards the middle. I'm gonna try not to go over my mushroom stem here. And am I filling it in all the way? Not quite, but most of the way. So now I'm gonna come in, and this is where you could use just a little bit of your light blue, and it makes almost the same color, which is kind of a turquoisey color. But I really like Phthalo Green. It's just so vibrant. You can see how that's a little bit more vibrant than that is, and this also doesn't have white in it yet. But so I'm gonna come in with some Phthalo Green, a teeny bit of white, and I'm gonna start to do short brush strokes over in here. And same thing as before, if you keep brushing over it again and again, it'll just keep blending more and more. So you kind of have to decide when you're finished blending it. You have it where you want it. I'm going to take some of my blue, kind of blend in the top part there. So I just keep going back and grabbing more paint. Get some nice thicker brush strokes in there. And once I get it pretty filled in, I'm gonna wipe my brush off on the side, clean my brush out. And I'm gonna leave my brush pretty damp. I'll just barely dab it, and I'm gonna take just plain blue, Phthalo Blue, and I'm gonna come in underneath that green. And our mushroom stem is actually gonna come down even a little bit more. So I'll just come in here. It's gonna go past the horizon line a little bit, so I'll just add that so we don't paint over that. So after I get my line there, I'm going to start to do short brush strokes up into the green and yellow mixture that we just did. So I'm kind of going up and going back down, and it's kind of blending into the blue. If it's not blending very much, you need some fresh yellow and teal paint. See how that didn't blend in very good there? But I can wipe my brush, grab some more yellow, just kind of work that in. This Phthalo Blue, when it's got a little bit of water in it and it's a little bit transparent, it looks much brighter. When it's thicker, then it can become very dark, especially when it dries. So again, that's kind of personal preference there. All right. So once you get it to where you want it, then you can kind of stop with that part. And we're gonna go ahead and continue the rest of the way down and fill this in, and then we're gonna come back up and start filling in our mushroom and start filling in our stem, which is the fun part. All right, so I'm gonna take my brush and I'm gonna still use this Filbert brush, and we're gonna kind of make the illusion of hills that are happening down here. What's super amazing is all of these colors blend really well together, and it's like using primary colors. You can get all sorts of shades of brown and green and kind of peachy colors, peachy tones. So you can really do a lot with that. We're gonna give this just a minute to dry, and then we'll come in with our trees when it's not completely dry. Right now, we'll just work on filling in the bottom. So the first thing I'm going to do is over on this side, I'm gonna have some kind of bluer hills. So I'm gonna take my Filbert brush and some blue, and that's gonna be kind of the first area, and then I'm gonna come in down here and do another shadow. So I'm doing just blue. My brush strokes are going mainly horizontally. And I'm gonna take, I got a little red in that, but that's okay. I'm not gonna clean my brush out. I'm gonna grab some white and I'm gonna go along the top of it. So first I'll go along the top of this line and adding some short brush strokes with white. And then I'm gonna come right in here, the bottom of this line, and do some short brush strokes. And I'm gonna come over and do the same thing on the other side. So take some blue. Short brush strokes. A little bit of white along the top. A little bit of white along the bottom. And now I'm going to start to mix up a neutral color. So I'm going to take some white, and I'll get my dirtier white. I can bring that over here. And then I'm going to take some yellow, some red, and a little blue, and mix that together. So once you mix it, you can see like this is a nice kind of terracotta orangey color. So it's more red than it is yellow and blue. So I'm going to add a little bit more yellow and a little bit more blue. And that's getting closer to where I want it, kind of a neutrally green. And I'm going to start to fill in the rest of the canvas down here. So short brush strokes. And we're going to come in with a much darker color later here in the foreground, so it doesn't need to be perfect. Okay, so now that I've started to fill it in, I'm going to brush slightly over the edges of these kind of hill shapes that I've made. And they kind of become like shadows. And if it's too dry, you can add just a teeny bit of water. The blue should blend into it and make it kind of a nice turquoisey green. If there's any texture of your canvas showing, you could add a little bit of water there. And now before I move on, I'm gonna add some variation into this. So I'm gonna take my brush, and in some areas, I'm gonna do more just yellow. So some plain yellow brush strokes on top of the wet paint. I'm gonna take red, add some plain red. And see, the paint is so thick and wet, it's kind of just blending in. But giving a nice little hint. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the blue. Especially down here on the bottom. We'll start down here on the bottom with the blue. And we're going to be adding more shadows in. This is kind of just our base layer here. Okay, so we have some variation down there in the color now. Go ahead and wipe that brush off and drop that in your water. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do our little trees here in the background, our little pine trees. So this can be done with really any of these brushes. I'm going to use my small pointed round to start off with, and then I'll go back in and show you a little bit with the Filbert. So you could use red and green mixed together for your black. You could use red and blue mixed together for your black, or you could use straight black. I'm looking for a lot of contrast here, so I'm going to use straight black, and I'm working the paint into my brush. So to make a tree, the first thing you want to do is just a vertical line. And you want it to be skinnier at the top. So let's say you accidentally press down too hard at the top and it's bigger than you wanted it. It's just gonna have to keep growing taller and taller until you get it to that kind of skinny little point. And this painting is reminiscent of Van Gogh, and he definitely had kind of a creepy element to his paintings. And so he would do the cypress trees in the background that would just kind of be getting skinnier and skinnier and pointier and pointier. And that kind of gives that element to it. Now you want it to be thicker at the bottom. So when you're painting so small, I'm showing you very big, but you can kind of go zigzag up the tree. That's one way to do it. You could dab your brush to get a little bit more of tree texture with little short brush strokes. So I'm going to go in now on my canvas here, and if my brush gets too loaded up, then even though it's a small brush, it's going to make really thick lines. So if your brush gets too loaded up, just clean it out in your water and kind of start again. So for my trees, I'm going to have a tall one over here. So I'm going to come to my horizon line. I'm going to go over about 2 inches, and I'm starting down, and then I'm slowly letting go to get that point. Now we wanted to do it while the background's just a little bit wet still, and that's going to kind of make it have a highlight at the top. So if you start at the bottom and go up, it's going to get kind of lighter and have a highlight on it. If you want your tree to really stand out, watch what happens if I start at the top. I'm just wiggling down and I go down. Then it ends up being very dark at the top, and I get a lot of contrast there. So we're going to do some small ones with our detail brush afterwards. So first we're getting our big ones in though. So I'm going to have one over here on the edge. I'm going to have one that's even taller. And then I'm probably just going to do little small ones. And again, variations, so you don't want them all 1 inch apart. And maybe there's some that are all clumped together, and maybe then all of a sudden there's none over there. Some short, some tall, some thinner. Okay, so now I can use this pointed brush, and one option would be I could kind of dab it to give it a tree texture like that. Or you can try with your Filbert brush. So getting it nice and cleaned out and flat. I'm going to use my black to get a really thin point at the top. And then I'm going to do kind of zigzag. And you could also use your Filbert, use the edge of it to get little teeny lines. Sometimes you can get even thinner lines than you can with your detail brush. And I was asking my daughter what she thought of this painting, and she thought the trees should be darker black, more contrast, she thought. So I just, when I first make the mark, I just love when you see kind of the yellow and green showing through. So up close, I think it looks better, but maybe from far away, it looks better when it's darker. You can also use your detail brush. Get some black paint on there. And you can do some little itsy bitsy guys in here. I have one over here that's just growing because I keep pressing down too hard. It's becoming a very tall tree, and that's all right because no one's going to look at your painting and go, oh my gosh, why is that tree so tall? They're not even going to notice. Only you're going to notice. And then I'm going to take this black and I'm just going to do kind of one line over the blue here. Kind of shadow that makes them connected. Okay. All right. So we're now going to go in and start filling in our mushroom up top. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our Filbert brush and clean it out really good in your water because you're going to be using pale yellow. So clean it out there. Gonna take white and yellow to make that tint if you don't have any left over. And I'm gonna use this and I'm gonna go not right along the black, but just up above it a little bit. And I want it kind of thick. Now I'm going to take my brush before I move on, and I'm just going to wipe off any extra paint down here in the stem. Now I'm going to take red, just straight red. And if you want to switch to your pointed round at any point, you can. I'm using the edge of my brush here. To outline it, and then the flat part to kind of get it filled in. And you're going right over the edge of your original outline so that you kind of see the dark paint through it. And it gives it a little bit of a shadow. So I'm seeing a lot of texture in my canvas there, so I'm going to go in and get more paint. And mushrooms aren't always perfectly smooth either, so if you wanted to, you could kind of wiggle your brush a little bit. And if you have to, kind of go into the middle of the stem a little bit just to make sure it's like really connected down there and it doesn't look like you stopped before you got to the stem, because technically this part would be behind. Now I'm going to wipe my brush off on the side, and I'm going to come in and start brushing where the yellow and the red meet. Kind of blend it in a little bit. So I'm using the flat side of my brush, going around, and then I'm going to go underneath the yellow now. And if you want your mushroom to be super red, you could leave it bright red. If you want it to be a little more peachy, you could add more white and yellow. So now I'm going to go in again with my pale yellow and just make sure that I've cleaned up that edge there. And you could do just bright white spots on your mushroom. I'm doing a more painterly mushroom, so for this one I'm going to take my white and yellow mixture, and I'm going to kind of just do some globs. Let's get a little speckles on it. And if you wanted to keep with the smooth theme, you could kind of leave it like that. If you wanted it more painterly, you could come in and do some short brush strokes. You could have some brush strokes going up and leaning towards the middle. Do some little ones going down around the sides. And now, same thing I did before, I'm going to And you know what, I'm gonna add just one more little highlight on here. I just think it will look cool. So I'm gonna take the edge of my brush here, and I'm not gonna go out very much on the sides, but in the middle, I'm gonna come down a little bit to add an extra highlight. Add some more red back in because I kind of wiped it out. And we can even add a little, before we move on, a pale yellow highlight back here. Just go right on top of the red and just add a little highlight there. I'm using the flat side of my Filbert right now to do short brush strokes that are making the top of the mushroom look curved. And it's gonna look curved anyway, so it's not super necessary. But if you want to do that, you can too. Making sure I have a nice defined line over here. All right, so now we're gonna do our first layer, kind of filling in this stem down here. It's very similar to what we did on the bottom, just kind of getting a nice light brown. So I'm gonna use white, yellow. It's gonna be more white than anything else. Let's just do white and yellow, and there's a little bit of red left in. We'll do that first to get it filled in. So even that looks just a little bit too dark to me. So I'm gonna grab some white. Fill it in more with more white first, lighter. And I still have my Filbert brush here. And now I'm gonna flick my brush upwards into the darkness there. And down here, I'm gonna flick my brush downwards. And it's actually gonna extend out into the dirt. So flat side of your brush. In the middle, your brush strokes will go straight down. On the sides, they're gonna start to go out to the side. And I do think when your stem is a little bit not perfect, it looks more mushroomy. And I also prefer a kind of thinner stem. I have a tendency to make my stem really thick when I'm doing this for some reason, and then I'm like, why is it so thick? So here in the middle, I'm gonna do some straight white just to make that kind of stand out. And then I'm gonna get my other colors and add those in too. So maybe I'll wipe my brush off. Maybe there's a little just plain red. Do some short brush strokes in plain red. There's some pinker areas, plain yellow. And this just makes it kind of colorful. Now I want more of my yellow kind of green mixture. It's a little bit too green. Went a little wickedy wild there. But I'm going to start with the green, and I'm going to brush up from the bottom. And notice too, especially when you're painting thick, if your brush is completely perpendicular to the canvas, what's going to happen? You're just going to kind of dig the paint off. But if the handle of your brush is close to the canvas, you're holding your brush more flat, then you can lay the paint on a little bit more thickly. So that's just something to think about. Now I'm going to wipe my brush off on the side, And up here at the top, I'm gonna add in some blue. So I got my dark blue here, and I'm starting in the dark area. And I'm brushing down. So I'm kind of dragging the blue down the stem here. And we're gonna add more black at the top of this, so don't worry if you're accidentally kind of carrying some of the white paint up. So blue, and then I'm also gonna do just a teeny bit of red. A little bit of red goes a long way. I kind of got a lot there, but that's all right. This kind of red and blue shadow. And if you want to, if you're worried about any thick white paint up there, you can take your finger and kind of wipe it off, or your paper towel and wipe it off if you want to do that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the lines up top here. This can be done with your small pointed brush. I'm going to use my detail brush. And I'm going to mix up a kind of gray color. So I'm going to take white and some of my red and blue. Mix those together and see what you think. You can do it in pure white, but if you save the pure white for the highlight, that's just going to make it stand out even more. So these are the gills of the mushroom, and I'm no mushroom scientist. I actually took a class to learn about mushrooms, and then I realized that my brain just isn't that scientific. It was literally felt like I had conducted brain surgery by the end of it. My brain was splat. So I'm going to paint mushrooms, but I'm not an expert in the scientific nature of mushrooms. So for the gills here, though, we're going to use our detail brush, some gray paint, and we're going to do lines. And the important part of these lines is the direction that they're going. So down here on the bottom, they're all going to be reaching for the stem in the middle. So down here in the bottom, they're going to be reaching up. Over here on the side, they're going to be reaching over. And I'm going to kind of dip down and then up and towards the middle. And a little bit of water in your paint for these is really going to help, because you don't want to see that canvas. You don't want your lines to get thicker and thicker. Now over here in the middle, in the very middle, it's basically going to go straight down. And now over on the side, I'm going to have it kind of dip up, down. So we're doing kind of a wave motion. So I'll keep that wave kind of consistent there. And it's better to get a few in each direction so you kind of get the flow of it, and then you can come in and add more. So going, and they just start to curve more and more. And the only ones that are more wavy are these ones up top here. So down here, I'll keep them a little bit straighter. And if you get them too thick, please do not worry, because we're going to add a black shadow over it anyway. So it's not a big deal. So you're going in towards the middle. And you want them very close to one another. And if there's not enough room to get a whole nother one in, if you're worried they'll run into each other, then you just add a little line in the middle. And they can also connect. So kind of getting very overlapped. And get water if your lines are ending up too big. And honestly, I would say probably the more lines, the better. So it's going to give it that texture. So I'm just looking for any little spaces where I can add more little mushroom gills. All right. So now, without cleaning your brush, you can get it wet though if it's dry. I'm gonna get some straight white paint. And I'm going to add a little bit of a highlight. So you can kind of pick one area. I'm going to shoot for kind of the center. And I'm going to add, so, and by center, I mean halfway between the stem and the edge of the mushroom. And I'm going to add a little bright white right over the top of some of my gray lines. And up close, this just might not look right. I'll add a little bit over here. And I'm just trying to barely touch the canvas. Super, super light. All right, so once I get my gills in there, you can either use your detail brush again, or you can use your pointed brush or your Filbert. I'm gonna use my Filbert. I'm gonna clean it out. Leave it just a little bit damp. I'm gonna take black paint. I'm working it into my brush. I'm going back and forth, brushing on my palette here. And I'm gonna use the edge of my brush and I'm gonna paint some black lines in between. And I have a little too much water on my brush, but it's gonna make them just a little bit thinner. So this is just for any ones that you got a little bit too thick. Or if you accidentally ran any together that you didn't really want to run together. And now I want a really dry brush. This is when we're trying to show the texture of the canvas. So my Filbert brush, I'm getting the black loaded in, but I'm just making sure my brush is really dry. And we're gonna add shadows now. So one shadow is gonna come from the middle. So I'm gonna take the flat side of my brush and I'm brushing over the part of your gill lines that's closest to the stem. And kind of making them disappear. So flat side of your brush, and my brush strokes are starting near the stem and they're going out towards the edge of the mushroom. So out this way, up, and then out to the side. And you might be wondering, why are we doing this? Or keep painting over what we just did. But this area would kind of disappear in the darkness. If you pick up any white, just kind of wipe it off. Now I'm going to brush down onto the stem. And if you pick up any white, you can just wait a little while to do this part. It might just be a little bit too dry. I mean, sorry, too wet. Now I'm going to do the same thing around the outer edge here. So I'm going right with the edge of my Filbert brush. Woo, got a huge glob of paint there. I'm doing a line down here at the bottom. And then I'm going to use the flat side of my brush to paint towards the middle. Now, I don't know why, but this black paint seems very, very transparent, even with that water in it. Kind of an interesting batch here. So I'm going right along the top here. Once in a while, my little gill line isn't wet and it kind of blends in, and I just wipe my brush off on the side. And using this straight black for this part is really just making it pop. And I'm also going to take some of my straight black here, use the edge of my brush. I'm going to go right on top of the red here in the back to add just a little bit of a shadow. And it's not going too smooth on there, so I'm adding just a little bit of water. I'm doing it just along the bottom. There's a highlight there too, so you get a little highlight and a little of a shadow as well. And what I'm really noticing right here is I didn't get this background color all the way up to the edge. So I'm seeing a little bit there that I'm not in love with. So I'm going to take my brush, clean it out here. And get some of my mushroom color. Mushroom stem color, that is. And I can also go over any little parts that I accidentally painted over on my stem when I was painting my shadows and all of that. Add some pure white in here again, just for a little highlight. Okay. So keep in mind with this that you're going to want to look at it from far away, because if you're looking at it too up close, when you're doing something this painterly, you might start to go, oh, I don't like this, or I don't like that. We've definitely been painting for a little while right now, so if you want to take a break, you could totally take a break and just try to get a new perspective on it. I'm going in because there's just this little spot, so I'm using my detail brush And I'm just trying to get some thinner lines over here at the top. And I also feel like I missed just one gill, so you can do little touch-ups. And I might add a little bit of a shadow on the right side of the stem here. I'm going to take my kind of black mixture. You can use your red and blue. I'm using the edge of my Filbert brush because I just want this to stand out a little bit more. So I'm adding a little shadow over here where it curves around. All right. So now your background should start to be getting a little bit dry. And now we're gonna add in a few more smaller mushrooms. So again, if it's not dry, you can use a blow dryer to quicken your process up. Sorry, that was my dogs exiting the room. So you could use a blow dryer to make it quicker, or now would be a good time to take a break because you want it dry anywhere you want to add in more mushrooms. So we're going to paint the mushrooms in just white first. So I'm going to clean out my small pointed brush here. And I'm going to take white paint, not a lot of water. And the basic shape of the mushroom is going to be very similar to our big mushroom up here. It's just the vantage point is going to be a little bit different. Here we're kind of looking up at this like big king mushroom, and then down here these are going to be kind of smaller ones in the background. For these mushrooms, you'll want to wipe, make sure there's nothing still wet there that's going to kind of take it over. And I'm going to add one over here on this side. So I'm going to find the bottom of my mushroom and I'm going to go down about an inch, half inch, and that's where the top of this one's going to be. And the shape I'm going to do is a half circle. So a half circle, and it's about 2 inches wide. And I can also show you over here on the side in a darker color so that you can kind of see what I'm doing. So we'll come in right here. We've got a half circle that we painted in white on our canvas. I'm getting too crazy with my white there. And then I'm going to find the middle of that. And I'm going to do a vertical line for the stem going down. And I'm going to have it slightly slanted this direction so it looks like it's kind of on a hill and it's kind of growing up, because that's what's cool about mushrooms is they're flexible, they grow all over the place, so they're not like poles, right? They just go straight up and down. They kind of grow to the side sometimes. So I'm going to go in here and fill in my stem with white. And then we need a little very flat oval at the bottom. So it's basically this shape. And then I'm going to fill in the top part of that with white. And you might be like, why am I not filling in with red right now, like we are on the side here? And it's because the red paint is a little bit transparent and the white is opaque. So if we paint it in white first and let that dry for a minute, it's gonna make the red a lot more vibrant. It's gonna stand out a lot more. So there's one of my little mushrooms I've got going on over here. And you could also use your small detail brush for this. I'm gonna do another one, again, wanting variation. So this one's gonna get a little bit closer to the edge of my big king mushroom. So I'm gonna put this one, let's see, and go down just like a centimeter. And I'm gonna put my half circle. I'm gonna have my stem kind of, and I might have some wet paint over here. We're gonna find out here shortly. Make my stem kind of go down to the side a little bit. I'm gonna get my oval in there. Okay, before we let that dry, we're gonna go in. I'd use your detail brush and take some red and some blue to get that kind of dark purple mixture. And you're gonna paint in this oval area. So let me just show you real quick. So here's the stem. It's overlapping with the oval. So the stem, you wanna leave white. But this area in here, you're gonna take your darker color and you're gonna fill that in. So red, blue, mix it together. You can start off just doing a line that's curved. Kind of come in. We'll add some actual black highlights later. Same thing, a line, curved. And then while you have it on there, you can drag your brush down a little bit onto the stem. So short brush strokes, dragging to make the top of the stem a little bit darker. And now while those are drying, if you want to, you can come in and do a few more. There's no rule to how many mushrooms you can do, it's up to you. So I'm gonna do some little ones over here. Overlapping makes a painting interesting, so I'm gonna do like a little teeny one over here, so a half circle. Get the oval, and a little stem. And you can make one that's maybe like a little bit more pointy too. I'll do another one right here. Up close, things matter. From far away, it's not going to matter so much. So I've got 4 little mushrooms there. And then maybe you want to add a couple in the foreground. Use my detailed brush. I think I'm going to do one right here, and I'll do it more in the shape of the one up top. It kind of looks like a little toadstool. Now if it's down here in the foreground, we're not going to have the oval because we're not looking up from under the mushroom. We're looking at it from above. And so you're not going to need to worry about that. Get a little stem. I'm still going to fill this part in with white and let it start to dry. So we can get it painted in with a brighter red. If you see any super thick spots, you can wipe with your finger. And I'm going to do one more little toadstool over here. With a short little stem, short little chunky stem. Okay, so while those are drying just a little bit, I'm going to start adding a little bit more variation around here. So we can use first my Filbert brush. I'm going to get some dark green going. So I'm going to take this Phthalo Green and some red and mix that together. I'm going to add a little yellow to it. You can use the edge of your brush to do some grass going up. You can also use the flat part of your brush for grass, but we just want it to get darker down here. And another great green color, surprisingly, is black and yellow. And I actually need some more black. Let me just get a little bit more of that. Oops. Got a lot of yellow on my canvas just now. So it's going to give you a very kind of dark foresty green. So I'm using the flat side of my brush right now and flicking my brush from the bottom of the canvas upwards. And if you're painting the edges of your canvas, it's a good time to do that. I'm going to use the edge of my brush to get some taller blades of grass. Again, variation. Maybe it's really tall in some areas and shorter in others. I'm going to come over here. Maybe there's a little pile of grass right here that's darker. I'm especially going to I'm going to kind of do a V shape at the bottom of this mushroom and add some grass there. Remember, the grass doesn't need to be all straight up and down. It can be kind of curved and side to side. I'm gonna add a little dark shadow over here. And I have this blue area here right at the bottom. I'm gonna add another little pile of grass there. Especially in the corners. I like to kind of frame my paintings by making the corners really dark and by making the sides dark too. Now I can take some of my kind of grassy mixture we made before, so it's kind of made up of every color. Red, yellow, green, and you can get some lighter. Little blades of grass mixed in. And I'm going to switch to my detail brush. I'm going to do some curlier ones. So I can take a lighter green, it's a little blue, a little yellow, my detail brush. And since it's a whimsical painting, do some little curly cues, especially over the stem. And the idea is just to kind of really fill it in with a lot of little details down here. I'm doing some short brush strokes on the tops of the blades of the grass to give a little highlight. And then I'm doing some kind of curled ones. Can do some red ones. That's too red. Whoopsie. I'm going to get some pale yellow. Get a little green in it, a little blue in it to make it stand out. So you basically want just a lot of different variations of yellow and green. And then we're also going to do little circles of color. So this is when you can kind of really go to town. So here, I'll grab some red first. And we're basically doing whimsical little circles. So some are going to be straight red. Bigger down here at the bottom, little teeny dots in the back. And keep going until you run out of paint so that they look more faded at the top. Then I'm also going to do some more peachy. So I have the red still on my brush, but I'm getting a little bit of white and yellow in it. And maybe there's like a cluster of 3, maybe a big one at the bottom. Again, I'm running out of paint and I'm doing little teeny ones at the top. Clean my brush out, get some yellow ones. And you could consider these flowers, you could consider them to be more mushrooms in different colors. You could leave them out altogether. can get some in your blue from before. And don't forget in this area too, you can add some circles in there. You could add some little leaves. You can have some little leaves coming off some of these acrylic hues. Now I'm going to go in. I'll first use my small pointed round brush. To fill the top part of this in with red, and I'm leaving a little space at the bottom because I'm going to come in with my pale yellow. So detail brush, white and yellow mixed together, kind of globby, painterly and globby. And I'm just gonna go right along the bottom edge here, and it blended in a little bit, which is perfect. I'm gonna do red down underneath it. I'm going to do short brush strokes, working my way up the mushroom. Very globby for this part. I'm getting some thick paint up here. So that it looks very bright red. And then same thing over here. And if you want to do, it might have made more sense to do the pale yellow first. I was just worried I would touch it and then carry it to the rest of the mushroom. But you could add in that line first. And try that, see how that works out. Just shoot for the top of the mushroom first before you go down there. So I got the top down, making sure I go, see I caught it, that's okay. And now I'm gonna brush over it towards the top once I get the top kind of filled in there. And then if you want to do the little spots in yellow, you can. Remembering the variation rule. I'm going to go in with more red here along the bottom. Sorry, my dog is barking. I'm probably not going to edit that out. Getting this bottom edge. And these ones, using my detail brush. Fill this in. My dogs are just snorting and barking. Not too loud. I have one dog and she does not like to go up the stairs by herself. So she's barking right now because she wants to be carried up the stairs. But if nobody's home, then she's perfectly capable of going up by herself. So she's a little bit of a passenger princess, you might say. Okay, I'm filling that in. And now on these ones down in the front, I want them to be just a little bit more muted. So I'm gonna add a teeny bit of blue at the bottom. A teeny bit of blue, not a giant glob like I just did. I'm gonna add a little bit of blue, short brush strokes down at the bottom. And I am making my brush strokes a little bit curved to the shape of the mushroom. And then I'm gonna wipe my brush off. And then I'm gonna take some of that pale yellow. And I'm gonna start at the top, brush down. And then I'll do my pale yellow dots. And these ones need some teeny little highlights and dots in the background. So I'm just doing a horizontal line along the bottom of the mushroom. And some teeny little dots for the spots. So now we're gonna fill in our mushroom stems before we go in and add the last black highlights. So I'm gonna take my mushroom stem color here. So white, yellow, and red. Fill it in, it's kind of a creamy color. And now I'm gonna add in some streaks of color. So I'll do just like a little bit of streaks of red. I'm going along kind of the right side. And then wiping my brush off on the side. I'm gonna take the blue and I'm gonna start brushing at the top and then dragging it down into the stem. Blue at the top and dragging it down. Down here especially. Want those stems to be a little bit darker down at the bottom. Now I'm gonna take my detail brush, wipe it off. I'm gonna take straight black. I'm going to go along the bottom part of the mushroom and then drag my brush down onto the stem so it kind of disappears there. Over here on these little guys, well, I'll do that after actually. Do the little ones last. So come over here, doing a line, horizontal line along the bottom of the mushroom here, then dragging my brush down. I have some thick paint, so I'm just going to kind of wipe some of that off. You can take black and you can go along the bottom, just a line along the bottom of these little mushrooms to make them stand out. Now I'm brushing down onto these stems, especially with the black, just to make them a little bit darker so they don't look so harsh in the front here. Black line along the bottom. And then let's get some of our green and our detail brush And add some grass coming up the bottom of the stems here. So I'm taking green and I'm brushing up the stem and then adding some little grass marks around it. Same thing over here, you can add some little pieces of grass in front. And at this point in the painting, you can kind of go on for a long time, just adding more and more details, more and more grass, more and more little flowers or circles. I'm gonna take some white here and just do a little highlight on this stem. Along the edge, a little highlight on this stem, along the edge. You definitely want to look at it from far away, see what you think. If you wanted your moon to have more definition. So right here I have kind of like a really faded moon, where it's like really glowing. The paint is fading from the yellow to the blue. If you decided you wanted more of a harsh line, more contrast, you could take your brush with the pale yellow. I've got my pointed brush, probably more white than yellow. And now that this is all dry, I could come in and make a more solid line and still have the glow behind it. You could take straight white. Make it kind of brighter on one side. So see how that kind of just made it pop a little bit? So that's an option. And really I would just work on adding, so you have all these like colors that you've mixed up, which is great. I would just kind of go crazy on there. Just adding more whimsy. See what pretty colors you can make with all of these. So I'm gonna do some circles and then I'll do some more grass. Maybe some are coming off the edge of the canvas. You can also, in the center of your circles, you could put a lighter color or a lighter shade of that color. So if I've got red, I can do kind of a light peach in the middle. I'm going to do some short brush strokes up here, just kind of coming around by the mushroom. Lightening that up just a little bit. Get some of my green. Making this just a little bit darker over here where the trees were. And making my trees just a little bit darker at the bottom so my daughter thinks that I took her words of wisdom. You could go in with more black up here if there's anywhere that you need it up there. You could add in more red if you needed that. Just make sure I reach all, oh, too much water. Sometimes with the detail brush, the water gets caught kind of at the top. Make sure it looks like the bottom of my mushroom is going all the way behind there. And that is pretty much it. So I hope you enjoyed this painting. I really missed doing this. I'll make a little video about where I've been, but basically I had another baby and I get hyperemesis, so I get very sick when I'm pregnant and can't really do much of anything. But I'm all better now and excited to make more paintings. You can let me know in the comments if there's anything that you'd love to paint. And thank you so much for painting with me today. I hope that you have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time.